Thanks all for coming. Now, Wison's been playing with digital comms for passing traffic, mainly JS8Call and Winlink, but anybody could use those two software packages to do that. Okay, JS8Call's on the left. That's what it looks like on your screen, be it Debian, Raspberry Pi, Windows, Mac, or Linux, or variations of Linux. They look exactly the same, so if you go from one to the other, whether you're portable or not. I'll elaborate later, but on the left-hand side is all the traffic you see on air. Anything that's on your frequency, there'll be see where that red marker is there? There'll be two lines, and that's where your bandwidth is per se, a bit like FT8. So anything that's in that bandwidth there will come up in the middle, whether it's directed to you or not. But generally, no matter where you are, you can see a faint signal there, all the signals to or from you will come up there no matter where you are. The window on the right is the call signs you've worked. If there's an asterisk there, you've worked and received them. In other words, transceived, you transmitted and received. How long ago? The signal strength. Whether we're fast, normal, or slow mode, that tick there indicates there was a message transferred. It'll be in your inbox. I'll elaborate on that a little bit later. Winlink Express, that is used generally for email traffic. Now, the idea of that is if you're out on exercise or at a checkpoint, or even if you're on a soda exercise, for your own self, and you've got to send a very urgent email. So you come across a bushwalker that's broken their leg or fallen off a cliff or whatever. You can send an email to an agency or to their siblings, their wife, whatever. So it's got its purposes for that. Winlink, JS8Call, that started off in beta version about 2-3 years ago, if I recall correctly. It was called FT8Call. And of course, it was too similar to FT8 in name, and they developed it a bit more, because FT8, as you know, you can't transfer messages except sort of a 50-60 character one-liner, and that's gone. With JS8Call, you can send a message, you can converse directly with them keyboard to keyboard, and it's totally error checking. Both modes are totally error checking, a bit like Packet. So you can transfer a binary file with Winlink Express via email, and you know they'll get it. But if you don't really want to do anything too big, it still is HF. Okay, JS8Call. Well, hang on, I'll go back just once. The origins of Winlink was a program called AppLink back in early mid-80s. Vic Paul wrote it. It was used for HF traffic handling. It used AmTor, PackTor, Clover, and on VHF Packet. We were using that back in those days, but for Packet we used FBB because it utilised compression forwarding where on HF different kettle of fish. PackTor 1 was pretty fast. There was no PackTor 2, 3 or 4 in those days. Clover was even faster. There was only one other station that I knew of that had Clover, and that was 2AGE, Gordon up in Lismore back in those days. That developed into Winlink eventually. It's used by a lot of, well, we don't have it in Australia, but a lot of agencies in the States, hams and Mars stations and whatnot, and they transfer messages to each other. They have their exercises there. The difference in Australia is we don't use the forms per se. We'll either send an email, and that's about it. In the States, they use preset forms for certain tasks. Something just to keep in the back of your mind. Nothing to stop you using them, but not essential. It's really more overheads, and you don't want that when you're sending traffic. JS8Call, okay, keyboard to keyboard contacts. The relaying can be a relay of a conversation or message handling or a message to their inbox. Say, for example, VK2AAA can't get to VK2BBB direct, but I can relay, like a digipeater or repeater, go via VK2, say, CCC. And that's an automatic process. You nominate who you want to relay by, or it finds it automatically. The noise floor, it'll go down to minus 20 dB, which is marginally inferior to FT8, but I tell you what, it walks all over voice. Minus 20 is way down in the mud, but you'll get that traffic through. So if you've got to send data, messages, whatever, it'll do it. 80 metres, 50, 80 kilometres during the day, easy as pie. 40 metres, as long as you don't go over the top of them, it'll work.
What effect does terrain have on these signals?
Well, it's propagation, but if it signals sort of even faintly there, it'll come through. That's the beauty of JS8. Minus 20 is very, very sensitive. Whisper's down to what, minus 28 or minus 26 or thereabouts. FT8's down to minus 24. You regularly hear a minus 24 signal and work them, even with a lot of traffic on there. And like FT8, you've got an audio bandwidth of say 2.4 kilohertz or 2.7. You might have 30, 40 stations on there, all working together. We've done it with, sorry?
And not interfering.
Not interfere. We've done it on Weisson's Google Meet Monday nights. You can have 2 or 3 stations transmitting at the same time. They've got the allocated time slot, but they all receive it and there's no clashes. It works beautifully. So that's even including thunderstorms and so forth. So it's very robust, very robust. I've got all this on a USB stick for those that require it or prefer it. There's the download link. That'll be in Mac, Windows, Debian, and Raspberry Pi, and all your Linux versions. There's a get started and a help. The documentation is not much better than the BBS programs of yesteryear. It's better, but it's not very thorough. Sort it out as you go. Okay. Here's working on a few things, and that's automatic message forwarding, which is great. So if you've got a message for another station, it'll forward it automatically. Where at the present time, he's got to poll you. The other station has got to poll the station and do I have a message? And it'll say yes or no, and if it does, it'll retrieve it. You can get a repeat of a message in case you accidentally lose it, computer crashes, whatever. You just poll it for that message ID as long as you know it, or what messages you have for me. So it's evolving, let's say, which is a good thing. Oop. Okay, here's a fun bit. Nothing installed on a computer. You've got the built-in audio sound card, the audio jacks. You plug in one device, be it 705, a signal link, webcam, whatever. It'll come up with one audio device. Okay, the reason you do that is to find out which one you're at. The alternative, oh, that's a 705, that's your COM port. So the only 2 COM ports there. The CIV is your data transfer, your push to talk, and the other one is, I'll get this thing right. And the other one's to do with basically audio being transferred to the sound card. Each radio is different. It depends on whether they have an audio card built in or not. If they don't, you need an audio interface. The bottom one, well, key balance. Have I gone one too far? Oh yeah.
Can you go back to the first, the one before that page?
For the COM port?
Yeah. So the screen on the left is when nothing's been plugged in.
Yep.
And the screen on the right is after you've plugged in the 705.
Yep. That's just an example.
Okay, and you told me that if you then pull out that plug again,
that should disappear.
It should disappear.
That'll disappear.
So it's also a way of knowing what is popping up when you're trying to connect something.
The advice is unplug everything out of your notebook, whatever, before you start. because as I'll get to it, including this applies for your COM ports as well. But the alternative will be that. Now, which one is it? That's why you do it.
I'd be lost.
It's simple.
705,
That's just my radio computer.
the 705 tells you which port it is.
It does, but it's not on this PC.
Connected.
Okay,
Now that's Pete's with everything plugged in.
almost.
So you can imagine by saying unplug everything, and then by putting in the one that you want some info about, and then pulling it back out again, it will pop up and then it'll go away. And it's a good way of knowing that that peripheral is using that codec.
It can get complex.
One of your previous slides had port A and port B.
Yeah, that's for the 705 only. If I've got everything plugged in but not the 705, that's what I've got at home on the Radio Shack computer. Just briefly, Miles?
Sometimes you've got to be careful because sometimes you'll plug something in and it'll take over an old COM port.
That's another story again, but you can change the COM ports.
Yeah, you can tell it what COM port you want
Yeah.
it to be.
That's right.
But I'm just because,
And sometimes you can change it even though it tells you it's in use, as long as you know what you're doing. Sorry, Glenn?
Is there a preferred COM port for that program? Because some
No.
programs like 1 to 4, 35 to whatever.
It'll find normally one that's not being used, even if it's not plugged in. Normally,
So you can have COM port 25.
as long as the software can code it for it. The older programs will only go either to COM4 or COM8. Some will go up to almost 90 or 100. It depends. So it gives you a high one just to allow for that if you ever get caught. If I unplugged all those things on the home radio computer, they would disappear, but it would remember what setting it was. For example, you'll find out later, so it says USB audio codec, and you think, okay, which one is it? You'll go to your sound icon in control panel in Windows. You'll go to playback devices. You'll have your speakers there. You'll have all your USB audio devices, including radios and whatnot. And you have a little number with it, but you'll see that as we go down, and it's important to remember that number. Every now and again, you'll find it reallocates a COM port or a USB codec number, even though there's nothing else plugged in. It was set for that before. You plug it all in, you switch everything on, it's blank. You've got to go to it manually. Winlink will do that. I haven't had JS8Call do that, so just be aware of that. And the ideal thing, if you go out on, say, an exercise or SOTA or whatever, best off to have everything plugged in, have the radio switched on, then switch your computer on. It's a bit like the old days with DOS. If you plugged anything in the serial port, if you didn't switch on that device first, XP and older wouldn't find that serial device. You had to restart. So rather than get frustrated, especially if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and it's raining, do it the simple way, even if it's mundane, and you won't get caught, or less a chance of getting caught. Okay, this is where you will get caught with data. USB interfaces on a Windows machine, even on probably Mac, and I think some distros of Debian as well. Okay, turn off display, sleep mode, blah, blah, blah. If you're going to use it for radio, have your computer set to high performance. Then go through all those settings, go to advanced settings and change them all. Hard disk, don't have it turn off, for goodness sakes. You don't want to go in hibernation mode, not when you're out on exercise. And going on the workbench at home, if you want a machine to be a little bit more reliable, don't turn off your hard drive. I know it's supposed to come back, blah, blah, blah. You can use an SSD, you can use whatever. But I've had enough notebooks at home on the bench tell you otherwise. So take it or leave it as advice.
Hard drives on and off is shortens their life dramatically.
Oh, even SSDs. Once out of 1,000,000, once out of 100, once out of 500. It'll come back and it'll balk, and you'll wish you hadn't. Sorry, David?
Well, one little thing. Once you've done all that, make sure you right click on your battery icon, press Windows Mobility Center and turn presenting mode on. It'll make sure your screen doesn't turn off and the computer doesn't power down. I know those settings should do it, but I do that in addition.
You can change it there too, but yes, good advice. That one's to do with that. Go into your device manager, your USB hubs, all your USB devices, your LAN, wherever it is, go and see for looking. I know it's a mail problem. Oh, it's somewhere there. Don't allow the computer to turn off that device, or even the LAN or Wi-Fi. You know, depending on what link you've got to your radio. Some will do Wi-Fi, the 705 will, for example, if you put it to a hotspot or whatever. So it's little things to keep in mind. Just go to that device, your hub will be one, and that hub there will be one. Just right click on that, go to properties, go to power management, untick it, and go OK. And every now and again, Windows will update, and guess what? It defaults. So before you go out on an exercise,
Every now and then.
I'm being nice. Come on, this is Windows.
I know.
Okay, this is where we come to where I was indicating USB codec will have a number. That's got number 4. Obviously, that's a USB speaker. They're your standard speakers for an analog socket. Your 3.5mm, the old 1/8. Your microphone, that's on sound under control panel. Under recording, that's playback. Under recording, you'll have the same thing. So I know what's plugged into that computer had USB 4 for transmitting audio and receiving audio. No, the other way around, or whatever.
Also, the green tick means that it's default.
Yeah.
So you right click on the one that you want, and then you go default, and it will be your default.
But sometimes you can nominate that in the program and don't have to worry about putting it as default there. But getting the practice of doing it, the less chances of things going pear-shaped.
That's right.
I'll use different words. Karen uses pear-shaped, that's kinda. You don't want Windows sounds going over air. You know, the ding-dong and the errors and you receive mail and all the...
You do a ding and an ident occasionally. You know, the window dinging and an ident.
I had a better one on my Windows 98.7 and Windows 8.1 machine. When it started up or when it shut down, it went, crap. So you don't want that coming over HF. Remember that one?
I don't know,
Why is that?
I've heard worse on HF.
Oh, we've all heard dings and dongs on HF from a Windows machine.
What do I have? I had computer, shut this bloody thing off.
Same principle.
No.
So don't play Windows startup sound, but you want to change that none. Okay, it'll play everything else. Communications and sound, do nothing. You don't want your tones or anything attenuated for whatever reason. Its interpretation might be different of your requirements, with the software. So do nothing, at least you are in control and you can do what you need to do. Okay, that's a sound part. Oh. Okay. Oh, that's the alternative. I did bounce it through. They've all got different numbers. Okay, but they all correspond to the same sound interfaces that have the same numbers. Where you went before in Device Manager, it just had USB audio codec. You didn't know which was what. Your COM ports, you got a better chance, but not your USB audio codecs unless you go into sound. So if you're not sure, and you started plugging a lot of things in down the track, just make a note of the different numbers, and they'll correspond to the interface you want. I'm hopeless with that. Okay, JS8Call, we'll go into setup. Okay, that part there is your frequency you're on. JS8 and Winlink, FT8, and a few of the others are all upper sideband, no matter what band you're on. You'll be 160 metres or 2 metres, it's all upper side for data. That's the bandwidth of your signal, but that'll vary. You can see the 2 red marks. That's probably in normal mode. Normal mode's 12 or 12 to 19 words per minute. Slow, that's the sensitivity is better and the bandwidth is a lot narrower. That goes to 5 to 9 words a minute, I think. I'm only going on memory, don't hold me to it. Then you got fast mode, that'll go up to 24 words a minute, but you use a lot more bandwidth. There might be 1 3/4, 1 1/2 normal, but still it's narrow compared to, say, a single sideband transmission. So it'll probably cover 150, 180 hertz on fast. That's about as wide as you'll go. That's why you can have a lot of stations in that bandwidth. And that covers 2 kilohertz as it indicated there. You can go wider or narrower, depending on what you want to do. On the left-hand side, as I said earlier, is all your received and transmitted traffic from other stations. If any other station transmits in that bandwidth, it'll come up in the yellow. Anything you type, you will type in there, in the white part. Anything that's directed to you will come in that section there. On the right-hand side, the asterisk indicates you've worked that station. In other words, you've transceived, you've received and sent data. That's a call sign, obviously. How long ago you received it, the signal strength, and where they were. So 2829 would have been way up here. 643 would be round about there. The tick there indicates there's a message in your inbox. That is your power or ALC control for the program. Now with HF, you're best off, you can have it full power, full RF power, but don't have any ALC indication on your meter. Because if you have it too high, it'll distort your tones, you'll get retries. And of course, you're going to have a better chance of causing splatter, harmonics, depending on the radio, etc., etc. ALC, you have it just barely indicating. We're talking only just, but not halfway, 3/4 of the way or anything like that. You will ask for trouble, because you've got to remember, JS8 uses 8 tones. So there's plenty of room for distortion if you overdrive it. Any questions so far? Well, okay. Did I? No.
Well, what power can you run?
It's not like FT8. Oh, that's a misnomer, low power mode. It's really a low signal mode. So put it this way, Max XOR. He'll work consistently into Europe and the States on 10 or 5 watts, depending on whether he's running off a battery or what. Well, that's with a portable antenna. But whatever you run, you don't want to run more than 50-60% of what your radio is capable of because of the duty cycle. That's more important. If you wanted to, you put an amp to it and run 500 watts. You're guaranteed to get a signal through.
The digital mode, 120 watts if you're advanced.
Oh, except for that. Mean power, 120. Thank you, Karen. What a spoiler.
I think that's what Phil was asking.
I didn't take it that way.
Maximum power.
Yeah, I was wondering whether the
But you-
How long is a piece of string to everybody else?
2.5 watts, 5 watts, or
You could run anything under that.
That's their
what-
maximum reported power. And
Yeah, we don't have to,
maximum power.
we run about 50 to 60 watts.
Yeah, the
When we're
radio.
doing the WISOM training, we probably don't even need to do that.
No, you don't.
I remember driving past your place once, and I'm sure the lights were dimming in time.
No, that was Energy Australia.
But it's like anything, if you want to try and get overseas contacts, you've got to run a bit of power to get there, especially at this time.
It's only because of competition. Everybody was saying the bands were dead. If you went to FT8 3, 4, 5 years ago when Karen did the lecture,
Oh,
there was tens of thousands of people on air.
it's still
The
like
band
that
wasn't,
now.
it hasn't
It
changed.
hasn't changed.
JS8 on the weekend, you've got to look for a clear spot, say on 40 or 20. That's very popular. The important thing, sorry?
I was just going to say, you need as much power as you need for the signal to get through.
Well, it's probably one, as long as it's no more than 120.
But
Yeah.
what I'm saying, you use as much as you need to actually make the signal.
Probably the
If you
best
do it
way.
at 20 watts, you do it at 20 watts.
Yeah. But never go above 50% of your rig. The duty cycle you've got to worry about. You've got to remember that transmit is probably about 15 seconds on normal. So if you go to slow, it's going to be longer, probably 20, 25. So it's a lot of heat generation. You've got to be aware of that. If you do it a lot, you've got to look at the longevity of your finals, your rig, and everything else. The important thing is the relay. So you got that all call there. That's a group. Now, if you send a heartbeat out, what it's requesting the other stations is to give you a signal report. It'll come back what they received you at, say plus 11 dB above the noise floor, minus 18 below the noise floor, and so forth and so forth. Everybody that heard you, if they've got heartbeat enabled, will send you back a NAC, whether it's one station, no stations, or 20 stations, depending on the propagation.
If they've got that turned on.
If they've got that turned
And
on.
just point out to them where it is, because you've got the button pushed in on the bottom.
That's that there.
Where it's pushed in.
There we go.
Because he pointed at it earlier.
Oh, did he, Miles?
Got your back, Pete.
Thank you, Miles.
His elbow was in the way.
It's stuck on.
That's the heartbeat. Now, I can right click, say, on that station there, for example, and request a heartbeat to see what signal they are receiving me at, if I've missed it or for whatever reason. You know, you've changed antennas. You want to see the antennas getting there better or worse or whatever. You can also form your own groups. That's all called that standard. Now, say you organised on internet a SOTA group, for example. So it'll be ampersand and whatever, generally 6 characters. You can have, say, ampersand SOTA, for example. And anyone in that group, anything you type there, you highlight that. In other words, you select or directed. That's the same as select. You highlight, say, ampersand SOTA or at SOTA. It'll send anything you type in there just to that group. As long as they're on there, they'll receive it.
We could have at CCARC.
Or whatever. I'm just using examples. Also, that group, if you right-click on it, you can send a message or store a message just for that particular group, and they poll you, or it sends that same message to everyone. Now, it won't do a CC, so you can't send it to, say, 2 people from 2 different groups. You've got to send it to that group only. And on their terminal, you'll find a little box come up. It'll say message received or message inbox or something or other. Message in inbox, it'll indicate it.
See where you've got on the right-hand panel, see where there's a star? If you've sent, say for example, I've sent a message to Pete, because I know I've already sent out a heartbeat and Pete's computer has come back to me saying that his computer is on. If I call sign and say store this in your inbox, instead of a little star, it'll come up with a flag. And that flag's telling you that you've got a message in your inbox.
That's right.
It's a bit like you've got mail.
Yeah. So there's indications of that. And as I mentioned earlier, any one of those call signs, if you can't get to them direct, you right click and you relay. So in other words, you'll use another station that it can hear, send that message via them automatically. It just happens. And they'll send an ACK back to you that, yes, I got that message. That'll come up in the middle there. So anything you type there is terminal mode. Anything you type, sorry, David?
That relay feature, does the station you're relaying through need to have that turned on, like the heartbeat?
No, but you can turn it off if you want to. Normally it's on by default, every time you boot the program up. Okay? You can turn heartbeat on or off.
What happens too is once you've turned the computer on, once you've selected a call sign in the right-hand side, as soon as you select the call sign, it actually automatically turns heartbeat off.
But there's a setting in.
There is a setting.
There's a setting in there that you can turn it on, but it's not a good idea because you
No.
generate a lot of traffic.
So you've then got to, if you're not going to send anything and you want to put heartbeat back on, you deselect that call sign and click
You got to deselect because that'll be highlighted.
there.
Doesn't matter whether you've already sent the message or you've conversed or whatever. You've got to deselect, and that way your heartbeat you can turn on or off.
Yeah.
It's normally automatic if you had it turned on originally. Okay, we'll keep going. Setup, that's the important bit. F2. This is where you set up your sound card and everything else. F2, that'll come up with the first screen. All that's default. You can add to it if you want. Your groups, any other group that you put in will come up there, but normally you can right click on that screen there, add a group or a call sign, and you put it in manually. It'll pop up there anyway. Your station, call sign, and your queue locator. You can try putting the last two characters in lowercase, which is a standard, but it'll come up in uppercase anyway. That one. Ooh, don't trust it. Hang on. Second tab along is radio. Now, for those that have got a 705, at the present software version, you've got to put it in as a 7300, otherwise it won't talk to it. You can have no radio in there, and you've got to dial up the frequencies manually, but it's easier if it's cat control. That baud rate is irrelevant. You can put it on whatever you want. As far as a 705 goes, for the other rigs it's important, especially some of the Yosus, you've got to use the baud rate that it's interfacing at for cat. The typical standard, 8 one-stop bit, no parity. I should have had hardware or software flow control, but it works anyway. I haven't got back to it. That's standard up there, the pole interval. It checks the USB cable, make sure it's still connected. You don't want more than that. Any questions on that yet so far?
Somewhere where you can download what the rate will be for each radio.
What the which, sorry?
You know how you had to change the rate for the 705?
Baud rate.
No, it's a setting in the radio itself.
In the radio itself.
Yeah,
Probably find it in the manual for each radio.
yeah.
If you go through your menus, like the 857D, you go into it and it'll come up baud rate for cat is, I think I got mine set at 4800.
The faster the better, especially when you're updating your frequencies, say with a bit of software. It'll take a lot less time. You've got to say 38400 as opposed to 2400. But for this type of stuff, it's irrelevant. You don't need a high baud rate. But with a 705, it doesn't seem to matter. You could have it set at 9600 in the COM port. You can set it to 1200, then it'll still talk to it. So, but for some radios it matters, so you've got to be aware. So if you stick to having the same baud rate there, if you can choose it as the COM port in Device Manager and the software, you got less chance of little funny variables coming up that in theory shouldn't affect it, but they can, and sometimes they do. Audio. Remember before when we had the numbers on the USB codec under sound? That's why it's important to remember it if you've got more than one. The output, which is the modulation, and your input is a modulation, whatever. But make sure they're the right ones. Usually they'll be the same number, whether it's USB or analog, depending on what interface you have. Output, that's if you want to hear any messages. You got to be careful with that because sometimes, as we found with Google Meet, you're transmitting and they'll hear it at the other end, and it shouldn't happen because the settings are all totally different. But the real world it's not a perfect world. The rest we'll leave as it is unless you have a requirement to change it. I hate the double, triple bounce. All the others, that's individual preferences. Reporter, same as FT8. and you can go through it, but normally default is fine. Okay. Winlink. It looks a bit like the old Outlook Express, your email client under Windows. Effectively does the same job. A few differences, of course. I'll go through the setup, but just briefly, to be able to use it, you've got to register it. As soon as you install it and you boot it up, it'll go to a registration screen. I'll show you in the next slide, I think it is, what you've got to enter. It'll prompt you for a registration fee. That registration fee is effectively a donation to one of the American groups to do with safety and whatnot, a bit like Wyson, MCOM, VRA, SES, whatever. It's a nag screen. You can click cancel or remind me later or whatever it is, I can't recall. But the program will still work. You don't have to pay if you don't want to. I think it's $25 US, rings a bell. It's up to you. Regardless, the program works. That's the screen I was telling you about. You put in your call sign, the password you want to use. It's not a default password. So use a password that you will remember. Your real email address in case you forget your password. You don't really have to put anything in there. Your full name, your full address, your proper number, your recovery email or your real one, your queue locator there. Leave the rest as default and go update. You will get an email from Winlink, and that means your account is activated. What that means is you can send a message to any call sign that's registered under Winlink or any email address anywhere in the world. So in other words, you're out on a site somewhere, say the bushfires, for example. An agency comes up to you, all their comms are down, the cell towers are burned down, not in operation, whatever. And they say, look, we've got an urgent email to send to Joe Bloggs at Homebush. You can, even if you don't have internet. You send it via HF to a gateway station, as they call it, and I'll show you how that works. Or if you've got packet, you can send it to the closest BBS that is running Winlink, whether it's on HF or VHF or whatever. So it's got its uses, and you can send attachments in ASCII or binary. But as I said, you don't want the attachment to be too big. A practical limit, I would say, 1 or 2K. So you only want to get a message across. You're not sending latest Windows, for example. You know, you've got to be rational about it. But once you do that, you'll get your registration okay on your real email address. When you compose a message, you click on that there. That's your call sign there, obviously. You can send it either callsign@winlink.org, or you can send it to a real email address, VK2CC@blogtown.eu, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can CC it, even if it's via HF or Telnet, and I'll explain all that. You can attach what you want, just type it as normal. Now, see that there that says select template? That's the forms I was indicating earlier to do with the American system. Their agencies are steered towards using forms for certain things, whether it's requisition of supplies, an accident, report an accident, whatever. Health and welfare report, they use templates, we don't. There's just no, it's more overheads. But that's where they reside. And what will happen when you first boot up Winlink is it'll ask you, there's an update for forms. That's the other word for templates. Anyway, when you finish typing your email, you can send it as a Winlink message or a peer-to-peer message. Peer-to-peer means it'll only go directly to the other station you can pick up on HF or VHF. So it's radio station to radio station. A Winlink message means it's got to go to a gateway. So if I want to send, say, a message to Bob, and I know they're on air, I go peer-to-peer. It doesn't have to go through the Winlink gateway. You can if you wish, but there's no need. You got a good signal from them, you can. But they've got to log in, and it'll be exactly the same as a gateway station. You'll get the same protocols of polling and the message going through. And it's similar to a lot of other commercial stations, the way it works. Similar to what Applink used to do many years ago. It'll poll or identify with a bracket of the version number. It'll give a prompt. It'll send an F and a greater than sign, which means I'm reverse forwarding. The other station will send a header saying I've got this message ID and I've got this message from such and such, for you. The other station will have a look and see whether it's got it or not. If it hasn't got it, it'll go, yes, send that message. It'll interchange, or exchange, I should say. And when it finishes, it's FQ, I'm finished. No different than what a variation of compressed forwarding on packet used to be many years ago. So in a lot of ways, they're still using the Sultan boards used, because if it works and it ain't broke, don't fix it. The old adage. Yeah, I thought so. Just making sure, not double clicking. Okay, you've typed a message and you've got to send it. You open a session. Now, telnet means through internet. No different than what you do with your service provider. Only difference is it'll send it to Winlink, the organisation. And that way, say you've got it, say, for a station that's at Alice Springs, they only come on once a night. No different to your HF groups on air. They'll do their skids once a day. HF station, say back a whoop whoop, they might poll a gateway station once a day and see if there's any email or traffic for them. And you can send it via telnet for them to retrieve whenever they're ready. Once it goes to Winlink, then it's a gateway. It'll go to, the same message will go to everyone in the world, and they can poll whoever they want. Packdoor Winlink, or Packet Winlink, means you're going to use a packet connection to connect to a gateway station, and so forth. You've got Packdoor, you've got Robust Packet, which is an SCS protocol. You've got Winmore, which is really defunct. It's not used anymore. It's been taken over by RDOP, which is far more efficient and quicker. Vara HF, which is very, very fast and very robust. It's another modulation scheme. Some of them sound quite funny. They're different. You've got Vara FM. That's for VHF mainly. Its limitation compared to normal packet, that only goes up to 600 baud. But it's very, very robust. It'll go through when the conditions are really shocking. A lot of path fades and so forth, and dropouts and all the rest of it. But you've got the advantage with normal packet, and use a digipeater if it's available. With Vara, you've got to have your tones set exactly right, and it's more pedantic. So there's pros and cons on both methods. The other one, packet peer-to-peer, if you want to, or all the peer-to-peer modulation schemes there, means you will send it directly to that call sign, which will come up to the next window. Okay. This is a setup. I don't think I've overshot. I'm going to double check. Okay, you open a session. We open IR.Winlink session there. Now you've got to set up your TNC, which is your radio modulation interface, and you've got your radio set up there, and of course your transmit level, a bit like the little bar that was on JS8, so you won't overdrive it. You'll see the frequencies there. I'll explain that in a second. Oh, going back to that, all the different modulations in there will come up. You go to settings to make sure you've got it right. When I was saying before with JS8Call never loses your settings, or rarely does, especially with your sound card interface, Winlink will. You'll have that set up working for 2, 3, 4 months every day correctly. Then one day it won't initialize. And you'll think, what the hell's going on? You'll go there and you'll find your audio interface is blank. You go down to the drop down arrow and pick the one you're using before, and away it'll go. Happy as Larry. Go figure. Might change on the next revision, but we don't know. Yeah, okay. Then you go to the next one down, that's the radio interface. Again, that's for the 705. You've got to use those settings for it to really talk. Others it won't. Until they revise their software. That's a CIV COM port that we saw earlier. The 705, probably the 9700, the 7300, and probably a few of the others. I'll have 2 COM ports, one for your CIV, one for your audio interface. That's ICOMs anyway. That's set for 9600, but you could have it for 4800. I guarantee it'll still work. Okay, there you go. COM3, COM3. And that's your interface or the serial port for your sound, for your audio. Doubled, yeah. If you got that set right, it'll initialize, it's ready to start calling. If you don't get that, you won't get anywhere. When you get that, you know you got your settings right. Both COM ports for talking to the radio and also your sound card. You'll see there's center frequency and dial frequency, because that's offset with your modulation bandwidth. They are set automatically by Winlink when you pick a Callsign from a gateway station. If, say, you're running out on SOTA, or you want to talk with someone personally, or you're on a Wyson exercise, you dial up any frequency you want that's clear. And normally you will indicate to that other station what center frequency you're on, and that'll pick the proper dial frequency. And that's where you set your radio if you haven't got cat control, okay? Any questions? Did I go? Okay, the best channel frequency. Okay, that's important. Before you transmit, if you go onto a gateway station, you've got to see what the best channel pick it. That's in the open session of that window. And that's what comes up. Now, before you go on an exercise or before you go out and use it, post updated via internet at home. What it'll do, your T indices and all the fluxes and all the propagation changes. So that's updated literally weekly. So post updated, you can update it via radio link, but it's going to be a heck of a lot slower. So just update via internet. It'll only take a few, probably a minute for a normal update. If it's your initial one, might take 2 minutes depending on your internet speed. But it's very important. That green indicates the quality of the connection relative to where you are. That's why it uses your Q locator. Say, for example, I wouldn't like to try Gerard on 40 metres during the day. It'll go straight over the top of his head. Horst, who's not in this one, 2HL, you're working 24/7 on 80 metres, guaranteed. So use your discretion with what you know about propagation, depending on the antenna you've got, where you are and all the rest of it. But normally the green indicates a good path. What you do, you click on the station you want, double click on it, it'll put it in there with the frequency you chose depending on the time of day and where you are, and where you want to get to rather, as far as the gateway goes. If it's red, not probable, but we all know what HF can be like. Okay, once you've gone start, and you picked your, have I double shot again? No. Once you've clicked on the station, you can start initiate a connect. Once you've connected, that little screen is down on the taskbar. It doesn't come up on the normal Winlink screen. So if you click on it once on the taskbar, you'll see a funny little icon. That's what comes up. Gives you an indication what's happening. That's your tuning, obviously. That's your waterfall of the signal, and that corresponds to where you are in the scheme of things. You've connected, it's sending and receiving, it tells you the speed. That's just the internal interface on the Winlink program with what it's using. That'll be different whether it's using, say, Vera, for example, uses another program on the same machine. So that'll be port 1 or IP 127001. This is what I was telling you about before, the protocol. Okay, the VK4LM, I think it was, yep, was running a tri-mode type of software, so it uses Vera, RDOP, and probably maybe Pactor. Okay, I'm setting that. I've got that remaining time with that Callsign. That's a protocol, the exchanges that I've got email. Send that, that's from me, that's the ID, and so on and so forth. The FF means send, reverse forward. Where are we? Oh, that's it. Both JS8 and Winlink work very well on HF, and the obvious reasons why Wyson is interested in them. The simple reason, when the chips are down, you can get a message to someone. If, say, the police, the fire is, whoever come up to you and say, look, we want to send a message straight away to someone like that. Or say you're on a checkpoint and you can't have VHF because you can't get a digipeater or a repeater up there, portable repeater, and HF will do the job depending on who's got what. JS8Call, you can send your checkpoint numbers quick and easy as pie. It's almost fail-safe, depending on your setup. Having said that, I've had a lot of stations on there over the years that they weren't within 2 kilohertz of a nominated VHF packet frequency, and that was quite ordinary, let's say, I'll be kind. It should never have happened. They couldn't get traffic through. You know, I was just observing in those days, and that was a long, long time ago, but you'd be surprised with some of the trouble that you can have, and we're not even bringing computers into it. Now, I'll just show you how the CAD interfaces work, just briefly. Where are we? We'll go to JS8 first. Okay, that's what it looks like. If you right-click on a frequency, you can change a band, and as you can see, the radio changed automatically.
No, it didn't. It's in sleepy mode.
Standby mode.
Oh, thanks, Bob. Did it now?
Yep.
Good man. Just for you, Miles, I'll go to 160 metres.
Yep.
Okay?
18420, I think it says.
Yep. Anyway, it's got to be an upper side band. You'll see USB-D there, which means data mode. That's only pertaining to the ICOMs and probably the YACs. What it means is it uses a different bandwidth and all the rest of it. With JS8 particularly, it's like FT8. Widen your bandwidth as much as you can. You're not talking about single sideband. Don't use 2.7, we're talking on receive. On transmit, you're only going to use, say, for example, 50 hertz or 80 hertz on FT8, for example. But on receive, you want it as wide as you can, because anybody that can be in that bandwidth allotment, you'll be able to receive. If you've got it too narrow, you won't. Remember, you're not tuning like a VFO on HF. So, for example, at home, I run 5 kilohertz on receive. The noise floor does not make an iota of difference. I've worked stations minus 24 dB on FT8 quite regularly. It's almost not boring, but it's regular. So you can set it to 500 hertz if you want to, but you're not going to receive any more. You're going to receive less, believe it or not. And noise floor doesn't make any difference. That's where the software comes in. Well, you know, including JS8, of course. But if you've got it set right, you go to any band and away it goes. It will do 6 and 2, but there's not much point in using single sideband on 2 meters for checkpoints. You're better off using either voice FM through a repeater, portable repeater, or just using packet. As Andrew can attest, packet is very, very efficient for data handling, provided everything's set up right, you know, your levels and everything like that. I don't think it's as bad as what it used to be years ago, you know, with people's variability of setting things up. I think hams these days are more astute with data than what they were 40 years ago, which is a good thing. Well, that's JS8. If I click on that, okay, directed to all call. I can do a heartbeat request, You've got all the things so you can query a message. Do you have any message for me? You wouldn't send that to all call, but you send it to a call sign or a group that you're associated with. But that's how you do it. You right click on the call sign of the group and you get all the other options that come up. Yes, Miles?
Sorry, I just wanted to know that dummy load, what's that in HF or VHF?
The which, sorry?
Dummy load on the radio.
No, it covers up to UHF.
Oh, okay, so it's only one output.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's alright,
Yep.
I just wasn't...
No, I don't need a diplexer. Yes, Mark?
Can it handle the output power?
10 watts, yeah, I think it's a 25 watt one. I think I've had 100 to it for a while. Gets hot.
If it glows, then
Oh, it gets a bit warm, but you got to use your nails. No, 10 watts, you'd run it for quite a long while. I hate to think how long I've had that, but we won't go into that.
And man, if he's running 10 watts, I'll kick him. Because he should only be running probably 7 watts at the most.
Oops.
Fix it.
Why to do that when I'm testing your linear?
Oh,
For 30 seconds?
for 30 seconds.
No, that was a sweep time. I didn't like it.
Yeah, I think you found out it's also Mars moss.
That's why when I did the VHS sweep on that linear, you got the spectrum analyzer screen, I had to start right there because the time I got up to whatever it was, 800 to 900 megs, it took about 30, 40 seconds. It's a long time for a carrier at full throttle on the radio. I was only using JS8 tunes, so you might as well be using FM, but I wanted a modulator to see if there was going to be any funnies, and there were, but that's another story. That's JS8. If we go to Winlink, same thing, we'll open, say, an RDOP Winlink session. Okay, it takes a little while to initialize. See what I mean? There you go, there's a good example. It's all blank. Now if I go to USB, the codec, go to update, that'll reinitialize, or it should. There it goes. Okay, it takes a little while, but there's a good example of it losing its settings when it shouldn't have. So just be aware, or actually any program, if you're getting funnies, oh, that was working before, what's wrong? When you're under stress, it's night, you're tired, it's raining, somebody's yelling at your back, like one of the horse enduros, I think, where was it?
Oh, the Tom Cruise.
The whatever. You get people that are demanding, you're going to be on a lot of stress, and so the simpler you can make it for yourself, more foolproof, when the chips are down, you won't get as flustered. Now if I go to start there, that'll transmit, but if I pick a different station, we're on VK3 MIT on 7065 center frequency, 7055 dial. If I go to channel selection, I'll go to 30 meters, and that should have changed to 30 meters on that radio. That's the beauty of cat control on a radio. But if you go peer-to-peer, you see what it indicates on your dial frequency, then just change your radio VFO to that. You never use memory channels. You would if you're running a Coden, probably some of the Marine HF radios from ICOM, probably a Harris, what's the Motorola one? They run a HF rig as well. But yeah, a few of the others you might have to run memory channel, but the program, if you go here to radio setup, there's a few commercials, there you go, the Barrett 2050, which is an old one, and so forth and so forth. So you've got choices there. Oh, there it is, the MyCom. That's the Motorola HF. It's really defunct. They're going to the Barrett 4050s now, and they are a great radio, I can assure you.
what interface do they use?
On the back of the commercial radios, some form of serial interface. We're talking about DB15 or DB9. If you go to the ICOM F8101E, they use a USB interface. It's the most progressive. So the 8101, 125 watts on HF, you can run any sound card mode. It's only a tiny little rig. You'll say, yeah, it might overheat, and yeah, you can pay Icon's prices for the fans. With ALE, which is a long transmission, you do that via 6 to 8 bands. They don't even get warm. Oh, typical commercial stuff. You could run something right next to it at 100 watts on an adjacent band, or even within 200 kilohertz, doesn't even phase it. That's the difference between amateur gear and real stuff. I'm not being biased, but it's just a reality check, but you're going to pay a lot more. Yeah, you get what you pay for. You wouldn't expect, say, an ICOM 718 to perform as well as, say, even a 9100. And they've got one of the worst sound cards out in comparison. We're not talking about sound cards, we're talking about adjacent channel interference and so forth. And that ain't compared to, say, if you get a FT5000 or a 101 MP. Different levels. You go to a Barrett, you can park a Linny on top of it, and then what's the big deal, literally. But it depends on how much you want to pay and what you need. Some are bulky. Sorry, Phil?
Dick Smith asked Maury Finlay of Finlay Communications also to see if he could do modifications for Yaesu, which Dick Smith was importing at the time, to get RB209 or RB211 approval for them.
Yeah.
And didn't come within.
Didn't come through.
Didn't come within Coon.
Yeah. We're talking about ham gear here, not commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we're comparing A and B.
Yeah, get the ham gear into the commercial,
Oh,
the
no.
mobile HF market,
No.
for Flying Doctor service.
Wouldn't cut the mustard.
They were doing, Maury was good with filters, so he's a very good engineer, Maury Finlay, but just the inherent design of the equipment failed in so many areas.
Yeah. Oh, there's horses for courses, as the old saying goes. Well, if you're lucky enough to use a HF rig for certain purposes, they're near enough to bulletproof. A lot of good second-hand stuff available out there. The 710 Icons, they still swear and buy them to this day. The only problem is to program them, you've got to run literally a real DOS machine or boot off a USB stick that's running DOS, which is possible, and preferably a real serial port on the back of whatever you're using. But there's ways and means, but it can be messy. But the radios are relatively cheap compared to, say, a Barrett or a Coden. So, you know, it depends on what you want to do. Anyway, getting back to this, you see how the radio changes the interfaces, you know, the different bands. So it's very subtle, very easy compared to the old days. It works the same with all the different modes. I'll just get out of that. Waiting. There's two ways to go to packet, or not packet, peer-to-peer. If you happen to be, say, I'll show you that other little window that comes up on the bottom. So we go to, not FM, HF, open session. Now, be aware of your firewall. You might have to allow access. Okay. There it is. There's a little window there I was telling you about. The RDOT one is different, but it's down on the taskbar. It doesn't normally come up. So it's a handy indicator of where you are, where it's progressing, whether your signal's there or not. VARA, not many people use it, but it's very robust. I'll close that for a sec. See there, it's got switch peer-to-peer. Now, it's in Winlink gateway mode at the moment. You can only connect to a gateway station, okay? If I want to connect, say, to Joe Blogs, I know there's another checkpoint, or I've got to send a message, or you can't do terminal-to-terminal chat mode with Winlink. There's other terminal programs available that'll utilize Pactor, Packet, and VARA in terminal mode, but that's all it is. A bit like JS8 or whatever else. You can type to them, but you can't send a message. With Winlink, you can only send messages. But if you want to send to a station direct, you either pick peer-to-peer in open session, or that button there, you switch to peer-to-peer mode. You type in the call sign you want, put in the centre frequency. Oh, that won't do, but well, I've got that wrong. That'll be your dial frequency. I can see the rig go to that. Probably wouldn't receive mode. That's in kilohertz, keep in mind, so 64 meg something. Won't transmit, but anyway, but you can get the gist of what it can and can't do.
Came up on the dial. Yeah.
Oh, well, it talks to it, but it'll be only receive, but it won't transmit.
What band's that?
Sorry?
What band's that?
No band. 64 meg, that's channel O, or VHF low band, commercials. You might find the army might use it once in a blue pancake day.
So you got 64 meg.
4 metre.
You can buy radios out of the US. So yeah, 4 metre. That's
Or
4
China.
band, isn't it?
No, 4 meters is from 72 rings a bell to 72.5, somewhere around
4
there.
metres, 800 millimetres.
Europe and England do. We don't. The National Parks and State Forests and Army utilise VHF low band. Not many commercials there because it's noisier. They've got repeaters, so there's not as much need for it, but it gets out very well. During the bushfire season, you'd hear Wagga Direct every time on 70, so it works well.